Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Andy Benkert, Customer Engagement Manager at SHRM-SCP. We've got two interactive learning experiences in store for you today. The first was about social PR and rising above the noise. And this session we're about to start is titled Online Influence. Are we overstimulated or underwhelmed? This session is part of a collaborative effort between HR.com and HRMarketer.com titled Sales and Social Marketing 101 and Beyond, Event 1, 4 jam-packed sessions all together today. Our moderator for Online Influence will be Kevin W. Grossman, Chief Strategy Officer at HRMarketer.com. Social media has created a world of unlimited marketing potential, but now your audience is more complex than ever. The lines are blurring between traditional media and a vocal community of bloggers, HR professionals, and thought leaders, and who influences whom in the marketplace and why you should care. We've got a distinguished panel of HR B2B marketplace influencers today. Sarah White, Talent Acquisition and Technology Strategist with Sarah White and Associates. William Tincup, SPHR and CEO of Tincup and Company. And Megan M. Bureau, CEO and founder of Talent Culture. We'll let them introduce themselves in just a minute. If you want to share anything from our webinar on Twitter, please use the hashtag #SocialEars. All right, before we begin, I want to cover just a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar is scheduled for 1 hour, including time for question and answer. Due to the large number of attendees, the phone lines will remain muted throughout the presentation. We do encourage you to make use of the Q&A section of your GoToWebinar console in order to submit questions, and I will stop periodically to answer them throughout the presentation, and not just at the end. After we complete our presentation, we'll go straight into Q&A. So again, please submit questions as they occur to you via the Q&A box on your GoToWebinar console. After that, we'll remind you all about HRMarketer.com's marketing software and services. Remember, if you want to share anything from our webinar on Twitter, please use the hashtag #SocialEars. All right, let's begin with a couple of poll questions. First up, do you think online influence is important? Yes, no, or maybe. And we'll leave this open for a few seconds here to try to get as many folks to vote as possible. So please do take a moment and vote on that via your GoToWebinar screen. All right, we'll leave this up for a few more seconds so we can try to get as many folks to participate as possible. All right, let's go ahead and close that down. I'm going to share the results so everybody can take a look at this. And so, do you think online influence is important? 79% of the people said yes, 7% said no, and 14% said maybe. And we do have one more poll question. And I'm going to launch that one right now. And done. Who do you think drives online influence? And you may select all that apply. Analysts, journalists, bloggers, HR and recruiting pros, or marketing and PR pros. So again, we're going to leave this one up here for a little while so we can get as many of you to vote as possible. All right, we'll leave this open for a few more seconds, so please do vote. And that looks pretty good there. Let's go ahead and close it. I'm going to bring those results up as well. And so who do you think drives online influence? 46% said analysts, 38% said journalists, 85% said bloggers, 54% with HR and recruiting pros, and 62% with marketing and PR pros. So I'm going to hide that. Bring back the regular screen there. So let's get this panel party started. Kevin, go ahead and take it away.
Andy, thank you so much, and welcome everybody. And I'm going to get to our guests in just a second. But that last poll question in particular plays to the mashup world that we live and breathe in today, in the world of work and business and pleasure and just the online realm that we play in more and more. And social media has created this world of unlimited marketing potential. It's also very confusing and overwhelming as well, because now more than ever the audience is very complex, and the lines between what we used to view as traditional media and analyst communities are now convoluted with this realm that we call social voices. And these are people that by trade aren't necessarily literally media journalists or analysts, but they do move the space. They move and shape the space. They create content. They curate content, they share content, they drive influence and conversations online. They're the connectors in your marketplace that lead to a lot of other pathways of prospects, buyers, influencers, you name it. So it's quite a complex world these days, and now that we've added in social voices. So, and the fact is that, you've got a lot of fireworks that are going on, and then boom, darkness, and it's really confusing on where you need to go next in regards to identifying what an influencer is in the first place and why it's important to you and why it should be important to you. And most of you, during the poll question, had said that you felt that it was important, and that's good, and there's some that are on the fence, if not saying no. But we'll see how this panelist discussion goes today, see where you stand after it's done. Now, it's also very controversial as well, right? I mean, for those of you that do monitor the online influence space in any industry, and particularly ours, in the greater HR B2B space, you've got the whole hubbub around clout and what it means and what the value of that is. There's per index as well. There's a variety of other influence scores. And then, of course, there's John Simmons' HR Examiner list that he puts out periodically, the top 25 recruiting influencers, the online digital influencers, HR, talent management, and others that he does. And, that causes quite a stir every single time those lists are produced in our space and what that means to be a marketer and a PR professional. So what we've done today, we've assembled quite a fantastic group of panelists that we're going to kind of do. So we're going to go through 4 questions and discuss those and kind of go round and round and see what we can come out the other end as it relates to online influence. And let me actually get to those folks now. This is just a quick social voices peek again, something that I will mention really quick and we'll talk about at the end of the panel discussion, is that we do track these in our HR marketer software, these social voices, over 1,300 practitioners, bloggers, and consultants. We don't fit the traditional roles of journalists and analysts that we do monitor, as well as the journalists and as well as the analysts. All right, that being said, let's introduce our esteemed influence panel. We've got Sarah White, the talent acquisition and technology strategist, Sarah White and Associates. We've also got William Tincup, SHR, CEO of Tincup and Company. And then we've got my dear friend, all of you guys are friends, but Megan M. Bureau, who is the CEO and founder of Talent Culture. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So let me do this. Let's start with Sarah. Sarah, take about 30 seconds to a minute and tell us about you.
Sure. My name is Sarah White. I own Sarah White and Associates. We are a strategic technology consulting firm focused on HR with a specialty in talent acquisition systems. And I also am the founder of HR Tech Blog.
Excellent. Thanks, Sarah. William.
Sure. William Tincup. I have both a background in marketing and user adoption of HR software. I love the social web. I blog at multiple blogs, and just happy to be here.
Excellent. Thank you. And Megan.
Hi, I'm Megan M. Bureau, the founder and CEO of Talent Culture, and I'm a talent strategist and hands-on recruiter. After too many years in the business, and I still love what I do. I love people, and I've make a business case for brand humanization on a daily basis. So I am excited to be here. I'm also blogging pretty actively. You can find me on Glassdoor or Monster and Talent Culture, and a little bit like our other esteemed guests. I think the list goes on, and I love to tweet. It's great to be here.
Yes, you do. So this is what we're going to do, folks. We are going to ask a series of questions, and I'm going to call on each one of you individually first to answer that question, and then we might dive a little bit deeper and take a tangent here and there and explore that topic as a group a little bit more, and then we'll jump to the next segment. And for those of you out there that are participating today, feel free to submit questions, again, through the console at any time that a question pops into your mind, as well as make sure that if you're going to share anything insightful that you've gleaned on Twitter, use the hashtag #SocialEars. So that being said, let's dive into question one. So we're going to start with you. In the human resources marketplace, in the big realm that we live and work in every day, what does online influence mean to you and why?
Well, to me personally, I think online influence is something that is vital, obviously, for my clients. I work with a lot of vendors, and to be able to connect them to the right people is important. But for me, as an individual and for my organization, having online influence for whatever we want to call it, our personal brand, any of those things, is obviously vital to be able to do the introductions and make new relationships that then we can take offline. Online influence really is something that you just have to be cautious of. So it's always something that I take as part of a whole decision-making process, not as the only part of any type of decision-making process.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. William.
Yeah, I think parallel to Sarah's views, I think it's the trusted voice. The thing about online influence and offline influence is ultimately you listen to other people. They might not make the decisions for you, but only a fool doesn't take in other inputs and make decisions. So you're going to take in inputs, and then you can rank and stack and kind of filter through those, and different people are kind of more influential to different decisions that you might make. But if I were, for instance, if I were making a talent selection, talent acquisition, software purchase, there's about 4 or 5 people that I would seek their counsel. And I think in an online way, we've just made more efficient the offline things that we used to do, let's say 10 years ago. You still sought people's counsel to make decisions, informed business decisions. Now you can kind of follow those people and lurk. And then when you need their inputs, you can kind of reach out to them because it's a little bit easier. The glide in terms of communicating with those people is a little bit easier. But I think, Kevin, a lot of it just comes down to being a trusted source, a trusted voice for people.
Yeah, no, excellent. Thank you, William. I agree. Megan.
I absolutely concur with what William just said about trust. I mean, HR influence, in my opinion, is not really about popularity or celebrity. I mean, I think having a lot of followers on Twitter or likes on Facebook does not necessarily make you influential either in the HR workplace or recruiting space. I think it's all about if you're an influencer to your peers and to leaders and your audience is aligned with your message, well, then you're going to make that message meaningful and impact other people for the better. So, I think it's a highly complex topic. I think it's highly subjective. I don't think there's one tool yet that measures influence properly from a data perspective. And ultimately, I think influence is a matter of context. So it's your ability to make people feel passionate about your ideas, and it has everything to do with whatever topics are being discussed and the action that sort of goes with that. So is the conversation relevant to an audience? So I think it's really about, making sure that your audience is being served by your quote-unquote influence, because that's really what matters most from an online influence perspective.
So, and I want to explore this a little bit more. So you all, thank you for that input and how you define it. I think it's important. I concur with all of it. But let's dive a little bit deeper, though, because you've got, for the longest time, I know at HR Marketer, we've done buyer and supplier survey reports, kind of research light, not deep dive, analyst research, but a little bit of a benchmark on what buyers do, where they go when they look for products and services, and the same on the supplier side of what they do when it comes to marketing and PR. But on the buyer side, for the longest time, either it's been number one or number two on the list of where they go first to research HR-related products and services is now it's online. That used to be number two, but peer networks is still pretty high up there. So, William, to your point about you always seek the counsel of those you trust and that understand the space that you're playing in or the topic or whatever it is, what do you recommend about those that are looking to find that online? I mean, there's a lot of information, right? There's a lot of blogs. I mean, how do they begin to kind of differentiate this? And we're going to touch on this throughout the call, but I'm just kind of curious. I mean, what do you recommend to them, to the listeners that may be just starting to dabble in it, on how they define online influence for themselves, I guess?
Well, I think practitioners, if we're talking about the practitioner, practitioners should talk to other practitioners. I mean, I'm constantly amazed when I present out at different conferences, and I ask them, where do you get your inputs? What voices do you listen to, and how do you connect? And what's ironic is that the HR community doesn't use each other. They don't really share information. And I think it leads to a very unhealthy and inefficient market that if there's a bad vendor, terrible implementations, terrible pricing, sold something in the sales process that is just never fulfilled on, why don't we make it really hard for them? And it's because they don't talk. So I think, rather than just pointing out the problems, I think a solution is creating kind of closed networks where practitioners can just talk to each other. And
sure.
Charlie Judy created a LinkedIn group called Trench HR, which I am not a part of. As a consultant, I can't get access to, nor should I. And I think one of the things I would advocate is on one level, they should just talk more together by themselves without us. Anybody that's a vendor, a consultant, an analyst, or anybody else that's not working a desk in HR should not be privy to those conversations. So that's one thing I do. The second thing I do is find a couple consultants that you just absolutely trust with your life, and you just know that they have your best interest at play, not their billable, rates or hours at play. What they really care about is giving you great advice, and just surround yourself by phenomenal consultants on one side and a conduit to fantastic peer discussions, be it through LinkedIn or hell, email, or like Steve Brown's HRNet or something like that, but just ultimately getting more feedback from your peers and then surrounding yourself with fantastic consultants.
Yeah, agreed. Sarah, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add in one of the things, so I appreciate the point William talked about of really talking to your peers. One of the things that I have seen with organizations, though, that really just reached out to peers is they often pick the product that works for their friend's company because they like to work with that company's solution, or they picked whatever their competitor used. And then 18, 24 months down the road, when the implementation hadn't gone right and the adoption still hadn't worked out correctly, it was really much more down to the decision just wasn't the right product for that company. And that's really, I think, where those consultants or advisors can really come in and help, because they have seen in different cultures and in different processes. We all manage HR differently. While we all play by the same sort of rules, how we actually recruit, retain, and manage talent within our own organizations is drastically different depending on your organizational culture and processes. And so the right solution for your network may not be the right solution for your particular company.
And I think blogging and social media just makes that more heightened because everyone has an opinion about something. And it's hard to know, are they paid by a company to say something? Are they coming from an organic perspective? I mean, that's where I think the complexity lies in all of this. Who are the consultants, et cetera? Who are the bloggers, analysts, and how, do we break up the silos or bring people together?
I think that what you just pointed out was something that I had circled when I first saw those results come back about who is driving influence, and the fact that journalists are the they're really the least likely ones to have been influenced by a particular organization. They're not getting compensated by vendors. They're not getting kickbacks at parties, et cetera, quite the same way as some of the other groups do. And so it was interesting to see that most people actually saw them as least influential still, but just interesting.
No, it is. No, and I think a quick parallel before we move on to question 2 that I wanted to highlight is the fact that for the longest time when we go to events, and whether, before even, the online preview of an event and the listing of the agenda, we had flyers that were sent, right, and some kind of print correspondence telling us what the sessions were, who the speakers were, and we got to pick and choose and choose that content alike. And I think today that same process is available, and it can be a little overwhelming at first, but I mean, that same influence is online now, and I can pick and choose the content and the originator of that content that interests me and is beneficial to me and my organization, just like I could do in days of old, and can still do when I go to events. Let's jump to question 2. And question 2 is, in your eyes, how have online news, blog posts, tweets, and other social media resources and tools changed the way that we perceive influence? So we touched on this a little bit, but William, let's start with you.
Let's boil the ocean.
So William, that's you first.
Yeah, I have kind of an interesting take on this because I want to read something. It's like I was at Kansas, I think it was Missouri SHRM last August, and I sat with a whole table of practitioners during lunch. They had no idea who I was, thank God. And I asked them, how do you pick your sessions that you go to? And in fact, I think they thought I was a practitioner, so we just kind of sat there, and I'm like, I need to get in the minds of the people that attend these sessions. So I'm like, why do you go? And they said, well, I pick sessions based on inspiration. I want to be inspired. And another group of people said, I want to be, entertained. And very small group of people said, I want to be educated. And I kind of follow the line of thinking is, I want my head to hurt. Like, I want someone to fundamentally challenge the way that I used to think about things or the way that I currently think about things. And I want people to shake me. So when I look at anything online, if I'm reading something and it's already stuff that I've already kind of like 95% of it I've already agreed, like the 5% that's nuanced didn't really make me smarter, I tend to turn those voices down and turn up the people that actually get me to think differently about something. Because that's where I'm at in my consumption of content, in my creation of content. I'm probably lagging that a little bit. I'm probably a little bit behind that where I kind of get people to think, but I'm not as thought-provoking as I'd like to be. So on consumption, on that level, I look and I'm trying to surround myself with voices and inputs that really shake me up. Inside the kind of the echo chamber-ish, the list of that everyone would consider as people that they read and follow and all those things, I want someone to shake me up. On the creation side, where I am also a content creator, I'm probably not quite there yet. I'm probably about 1.5 years away from being truly innovative on that level.
Well, tell me how you got to that timeline when we're offline. All right.
Fair enough.
No. So Megan.
Well, I mean, in a nutshell, I think the ways in which we perceive influence have completely been turned upside down. I mean, I don't know how else to say that. I mean, it's all about word of mouth marketing. I mean, the power, so to speak, is now in the hands of the quote-unquote people, the general public, bloggers. I mean, we live in a culture where companies have a loss of control over the reputation of their brands, their products, their services, their employees, and wisdom is given to the crowd. It's all about, social media and the voices that are being echoed through blogs and tweets and Facebook updates, and there's a loss of control at the leadership level in a major way. And I think that word of mouth is reigning right now, and increasingly I think the use of social media is playing an important role in the professional lives of all of us, whether you're a decision maker and a leader and you're utilizing the tools of social media, or you're just looking to get engaged because you feel like you may be missing out on a much greater scale right now. So I think decision making is becoming more social. So I think there's a changing of dynamics with the relationships of companies and their customers in marketing and communications, and I think this is forever, and I don't think we're ever going to go back to where we were, 5 or 10 years ago. I mean, we have, how many people are connected to the Internet? 1 billion people, some crazy number. I mean, I won't get into the specific stats. I may not be correct, but this is a global movement right now in terms of social media and marketing and word of mouth, and very complex, a lot of moving parts, which I, of course, find fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, Sarah, you want to comment on that?
And I actually am going to take this from a little bit different perspective, because I think one of the biggest things that has changed is we now perceive people to be influential because they talk a lot. They make noise, not because of what they actually have to say a lot of times. And I think it's something that everyone has to be just conscientious of and be aware of. From a practitioner perspective, you have to watch who is sending out the content that you're looking at, what their background is, what maybe their relationship is, as we mentioned earlier with the vendors that they're playing things out for. And from a vendor side, if you're a vendor, you have to watch who you're working with, because just because somebody is out there and everywhere, it doesn't mean that they are really influential as what they say. I mean, I have seen it happen where, somebody who's influential in things has written blog posts about a product, but since they didn't really understand the product, it actually worked against the company because they explained it wrong. They highlighted the wrong value of the product. And so as we go into this, what we're doing and how our perceptions have shifted to this volume versus value of influence, we really have to watch from a business perspective. We start trying to monitor ROI.
Yeah, I agree. To kind of expand on this topic a little bit more before we jump to the next question, was it about, I don't know, a year ago, I remember reading an article by Dr. Wendell Williams on it was posted on the ERE Daily, and probably his own blog and elsewhere as well, but it was talking about the dangers of the democratization of influence and expertise and social voice and all the things that we've been talking about so far, and just being careful about weighing, between who the person is, what their background is, what they're talking about. Is it contextual and relevant to that part of the industry? And on the one hand, it has been great that we've democratized, the worldwide interweb, and that all of us can have a voice. But when it comes to influence and expertise, then there becomes that there's more granular efforts that have to be taken into account when you start looking down. For me, being moved and schooled, which is what all of you have kind of touched on, is what's critical. And to know, yes, I think to having the right voice, to know the subject matter that you're talking about and to understand it in the context as it should be understood, and yet you're still moving me and you're schooling me, that to me is what I aggregate to. And everything, and you can tell that difference quite quickly. And that can even be promotional as well, right? From a marketing perspective, a product perspective, you can move in school and still promote.
Absolutely.
And there's a big difference there. So any other thoughts about that before we move on?
Yeah, actually,
I'm sorry, William.
No
Can I pop in for just a sec?
Sure, go ahead.
I just want to, because I'm in the talent strategy and recruiting space, I want to just drill home the message that Sarah just brought up. It's so important to look at people's backgrounds and look at the context in which they're making statements or blogging. And really, I make a living, right? What do? I look at people's skill sets. And I'm always looking at how does their online brand match up with their in-person brand, right, if I'm searching for talent for a specific client of mine. And it's so important to really dig deep and to, you want to take people at face value and be open-hearted. That's certainly one end of it, and socialize and engage and be enthusiastic. But there's also that reality check of like, all right, if you're really sizing somebody up and you want to have credibility in whatever industry you're in, it's important to look deeper. So I just wanted to add that in.
Sure. William. Thank you, Megan.
I think a lot of it, when I look at influence, there's this old kind of adage around weathermen and egos. And if you ever want to know if your weatherman or weatherwoman has an ego, it's the way that they display and render the forecast. If they say, my forecast for the week is ... they have a huge ego. Like, never talk to those people because they're megalomaniacs. If they say, our forecast for the week is ... then they're fairly humble people. I think the same can be said about our community and our ecosystem. If there's anybody running around our ecosystem that actually touts their influence, then they probably don't. Then they probably don't have it, and or we probably should never talk to that person. But I think there's a level of humility that we all share. I mean, all four of us, I know, share it, that we all are humble. And we're all students of the game. We're all learning this emerging media at an emerging time, emerging technologies, and the practitioners at an emerging place. It's like, you know what, no one has all the answers. Anyone that says they're a guru, you automatically discount them, take 30 points off their IQ. I think that when we look at influence, it's really kind of filtering back to everything that Sarah, Megan, and you have already said. You look at their background. You look at really, what are they really trying to say? Are they humble? Can they represent some of the things that are going on in the space without, kicking your tail, so to speak, with how influential, quote unquote, I mean, I'm using air quotes, but you can't see them, how influential, quote unquote, that they are. I think if, last thing I'd say is anybody that says influential in their name or anything as they kind of, kind of set themselves up, they aren't as influential as they think they are.
Right.
Agreed. So scratch that for my middle name. Sorry.
Yeah, Kevin, really, we got to talk about that.
So, no, I agree with all that. Listen, I want to do a quick reset and tell the audience out there, we do have one question which I want to get to. That's a good meaty one, I think, that will round out this session. So we'll get to that. Please ask your questions, folks that are out there right now listening to us. Also, feel free to share any insight that you glean on Twitter. Speaking of online and influence, use the hashtag social ears, no space, social ears. And the last thing I wanted to just say about that, we're going to jump to 3 next, but William, and to that point is that there is a balance that you can strike that would be between being humble and yet also being bold because of what you know and how ensconced you are in that particular part of the space too. So without calling yourself influential. And let's go to question 3. And yes, Andy, I know we have a question that's a really good one about ROI that I want to come back to. So, but let me jump to this next segment first. Speaking of where we're at in the session now, how has social influence affected brand management, marketing, and PR? And we'll start with Megan this time.
Well, it's, as I mentioned before, it's really turned everything upside down, right? It's all about word of mouth. The power lines have shifted. I mean, I think William touched upon this earlier in the call. It's about these sort of media peer groups that are being set up, the way in which we do business as professionals, and this could be, employees, customers, etc. We're using social media almost as a crowdsourcing tool, as a platform for discussion of our ideas and experiences and a knowledge exchange. So I think, in a sense, I think social influence has sort of flattened the game out a little bit more, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Yeah, no. Thank you, Megan. Sarah, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I think it really has changed to be less about who you know and more about who you know and who they know. And it really has, for organizations that are trying to spread the word and get it out there, it's associating your brand and building the relationships with people that you want to represent your brand well, because so much of social, especially within the HR community, is not just a corporate brand. You know, we aren't, Megan isn't, you aren't, I'm not, William isn't, just all work all the time on Twitter and Facebook and on some of the other channels. And so all of that all plays back into social influence and how you want your brand represented, marketed, and the PR you want associated back to your brand.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. William.
Sure. I think brand used to be really easy, and in fact, a lot of us have had this discussion in different ways. It's, you know, if you go back 15 years, brand was owned by marketing, and it was just done. That was the easiest discussion ever. People came up through marketing, they owned the brand, and it was done. Now, I think with social, I think it was probably going to happen anyhow, but with social, we've now, everyone owns the brand. Your recruiters own the brand, the HR owns the employee, the brand, the candidate brand, the consumer brand. You've got a leadership brand. You've got all these different, I say brand fractions, but really it's the same brand. You just kind of keep turning the crystal. And so I think that social, the way that social has kind of created an air of transparency where now everyone can see everything in some ways. And now what really should have happened all along is that the front line owns the brand. Because so whatever the marketing people came up with 15 years ago, ultimately where the rubber met the road was the front line. The customer service reps, the sales reps, the marketing reps, the person that you met in the stores or at your restaurants, whatever, the people that actually work for the company, the people, the brand ambassadors. With social, we've just, all that hierarchy that used to be there and the ownership of those things that used to be fairly simple, that's gone. Now everyone owns the brand, and oh, by the way, if there's a problem with the brand, it's not like weeks and months and years later that you find out about it. It's 14 seconds later that the tweet starts trending or the hashtag starts trending, that now you have to have a response. So I think on one level, Kevin, I would say, we've got some ownership stuff that we've got to resolve inside of our companies, and how do we co-own something as important as brand? And then I think because of social, you've got response times, both proactively but also reactively. You've got to be able to look at how do we interact with these different social media tools and mediums, and create kind of strategy. So.
I agree. And it's still pretty new, and then the fact, and just to all those points, the fact is that at any given time, somebody that I may be recruiting from an organization at some point could also be a buyer, and vice versa. And so again, the brand world blend, and it's exciting, and it's also challenging, because I think a lot of companies, based on recent research that I've seen from a variety of analysts in our space, that the true numbers of companies adopting any social media best practice is still not as big as what we may be being told by other entities. So, half of organizations still are doing some form of blocking, and that affects not only the employment brand, but as well as the consumer product service brand as well. I want to touch on now this. I want to get to this question that was submitted, because it definitely relates to this topic before we jump to the last segment. And the question is, what best practices out there to measure ROI in the social media world when connecting with an influencer of any kind, and how can that be measured? And this has been a long-standing question, as you all know, as it relates to social and the parallel, whether it's social recruiting or marketing, and those that go hand in hand as well. Anyway, how do we measure that? This is out open to anybody, by the way.
I'd like to just jump in. It's Megan here with Talent Culture. I think we've got tools online like the creds, the clouts, the peer indexes, something called tweet level, tracker, the list goes on, right? So we have these influencer tools. We have the ability to look at people's backgrounds from a skill set, right, as I spoke about earlier. I really think it's a combination of using your best judgment. I don't think there's one tool, as I mentioned earlier in this webinar, that is perfect yet, because of a lot of various factors. But I think that if you sort of take a pie graph and you split it out into percentages and you use your best judgment and you go with your gut, and is their background resonating with the content that you're interested in? Do they have some level of experience in what they're talking about? I mean, I think you kind of, unfortunately, I'd love to be able to come out here and say, yes, there's one tool, but it doesn't exist, in my opinion, to date. Anybody else want to weigh in?
Yeah, because I don't think ROI has anything to do with somebody's influencer score anywhere. If I'm a business, if I'm a vendor selling into this, or a marketing professional, and I'm looking for the ROI of social media, I'm going to really look at three things. And what I do with my clients is we look at three things. We look at the number of connections they make, and that does not mean number of followers. It doesn't mean the number of people that like you on Facebook, because all of those are very easily manipulated. What it is the actual number of true relationships, connections of people who can either provide a resource, provide value to you as an organization, or connect you with other people. We also then look at any type of leads or sales that actually come off of social media. And that isn't, again, something where people are going to start having sales right away, but you will start seeing lead generation coming through if you're using social media properly. And the third area that I encourage people to look at is brand awareness. And you can do brand awareness through things like surveys and looking at sampling people. And one of the biggest mistakes I think organizations do when they do surveys is they do surveys and they send them out to their current client list, maybe their prospect list. They send them out to a LinkedIn group they're part of, on Twitter. And so they're already getting a tainted sample, but sending out a brand awareness survey to a group of people who you really previously didn't have much interaction with at all will really tell you if you are doing a good job through social media and your other channels of getting your name out there. Just you have to remember, social media is just one part of an overall brand and marketing strategy. It isn't your whole brand and marketing strategy. And if it is, then your numbers are going to be even more relevant from an ROI perspective.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Kevin, you want me to take a whack at it?
Yeah, please do it. All yours.
I think I love what Megan and Sarah have already said. I think a lot of it comes down to an objective. So just like Sarah said, it's like, what are you really trying to get out of this? So let's take a real world example. Let's say you're an HR software company and you're trying to create you've got a user session, and you want to create kind of an analyst briefing on the front end of that. So it's like the objective is you want 100 bloggers, analysts, etc. in the room. Okay, so objective's been set, done. Who's the audience? You've defined that however you wish. And then what's the action? And so how do you create an ROI? Well, you can't just go and create an ROI in social without having an idea of what you're trying to get out of it. So what is the goal? What's the objective? And then what's the action that you really want to measure? Is it sales? Is it leads? Is it meetings? Is it, whatever that is? Once again, different people are going to have different, metrics that are important to them at different times. You can get to a very simple ROI if you have a very clear goal, a clearly defined audience, and some type of measure, an action that you want to create a measure around.
Right on the money. No, thank you, all three of you. Yeah, good input on all angles of that one. So let's jump to the last one, and we're kind of running up on the hour, and we want to make sure we get to the last segment, and then any other questions that may come in. So folks, if you've got other questions, please submit them now. This is your opportunity to ask directly to some of, I would argue that some of the most influential and well-deserved folks in our space, in the HR B2B space. Question 4, how do you build relationships with influencers that increase personal and business brand visibility? So let's get right to kind of the heart of what do I do, right? I mean, William, I'm aware of you. What do I do? How do I build a relationship with you? And can I?
It's yes. I think it's funny because Sarah and I were just at South by Southwest and Talent Net Live down in Austin on Friday. I think a lot of this stuff, the online stuff, is fantastic. It's I'm an open networker, so I kind of take everyone in regardless of profile or background or whatever. But it's the offline stuff that actually gets my juices going. It's sitting across the table from someone that I've always held in high regard, and just brainstorming with them, just talking with them. And I get more out of the offline stuff than I've ever gotten out of online. Anything online networking related, I get more out of just hanging out with Kevin, with you, with Megan, with you, with Sarah, with you, and with anybody. I think it's the conversations that you have at conferences or on the phone or whatever I think it's that stuff that's actually more compelling. So it's the online is the mechanism for me to get offline, if that makes sense.
It does, and I completely sure. In fact, Sarah, why don't you go next and comment on that one?
Sure. I think, again, I'm big on my list, being a type A person. I think the first thing that I suggest is just to engage. Start the conversation up. When we are at events and out these places, it's great when people just come up and talk. I know myself, I'm actually pretty shy in person when I'm meeting people for the first time. I'm not the person that's going to really walk up and start conversations often. I'll talk and hang out with people I already know, but I'm not necessarily the most outgoing person when it comes to that. But it's okay to walk up to anybody. As you mentioned, we were at South by Southwest, and there's a lot of true famous people there, and everybody, it doesn't matter who they are, and there's really no one famous in the HR world. It's just they're normal people. They have normal lives. They have normal jobs. They like normal things just like everyone else. Just start conversations with them, not like they're influencers, but just they're any other human being on earth. Second is don't sell. When vendors walk up and they right away are throwing me their pitch the first 2 seconds we start talking, that's fine. That's not how you build a relationship with an influencer. It's how you tell somebody about your product. I think Chris Rogan, who said it, always have something to sell, but you don't always need to be selling it. And finally, again, just building that relationship. Relationships take time. You're not going to have it overnight. It's something that comes from trust, and it's a two-way street, and influencers expect the same. They want to build a relationship with you and your organization as well, but they don't want it to be always like, hey, here's my latest PR, put it up on your blog, put it up on your blog, but, we're never going to talk to you unless we're sending you a press release. So,
I cannot concur with what Sarah and William have said. I mean, as somebody who's blogging and, I'm fairly active online, I mean, I can tell you one thing that I get a lot is people sending me their books. And I get books, I get one book a week in the mail to review, to let everybody know out there in the general public. One book a week to review.
And if you don't review,
half of these authors I've never met with, I don't have a relationship with, and I don't have any sense of context on why they're coming into my inboxes. So again, building a relationship with me or with Sarah or William or Kevin or anybody, we're people too. Bloggers are people too, and you have to have a context. You have to treat people like people. Treat them like your friend. Build up, warm people up. I don't like getting 50 DMs on Twitter a day with people asking for the sun and the moon and the stars. All I want to do is connect and take it to that next level and really get to know people and be here to educate and empower and hopefully I'll say something that makes you do something different or thinks about something differently. But again, build a relationship. Build a relationship first before you ask for me to write a book review. Yeah. It's really, really important. Just and likewise, I live by the same rules as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the connection is important. Making money is important too, but the connection is important first. I get it. And I'll tell you this: the example of what you just said, Megan, about the book. Because I get them periodically too, and unless it's something that really seems to be an alignment, for me, and I'm going to be able to make the time to do that, then maybe I'll say yes. I'll, send it my way. But I did get a pitch recently that struck me, and this kind of plays to the theme not only in this call today, but the earlier session that we did about social PR, is identifying who it is you're trying to target and/or build a relationship with. And really making it relevant, and somehow try to connect with that person. And I got a pitch, for Reid Hoffman's latest book that just came out, The Startup You. I think that's what it's called. Did I get that right? And I've cracked it. I haven't, I've started just to read through it to be perfectly frank, but I do plan on reading through it. And but the pitch that I got was, it was just an email outreach from one of the people promoting it, but they really struck me because he actually took the time to read one of my personal blog posts on the Daddy blog that I have, and referenced made a connection with me. It was articulate, it was clear, it was relevant, and it got my attention. And the fact that he took the time to do that, I mean, even if in reality he scanned that post and said, he took the time, he made that connection with me, and I said, by all means. And I continue to plug that in either calls that I do or sessions, and talk about the fact and help plug the book, even though I still need to read it, just because that to me was an appropriate pitch. It was relevant, timely. He made a connection with me, and if we ever meet at a show, it'd be great to have a conversation with him as well, and any of those things. So I think that relates to everything that we're talking about right now. What I want to do next, because we're running up on time, and I want to just talk a minute about social ears. And while I'm doing that, folks, if you have any other questions that you'd like to submit to the panel, please do so right now. Feel free. We'll definitely take a few more questions before we wrap. But I want to talk about social ears just for a second, and talk about putting a lens on your marketplace. This is our social listening and analytics product that we launched a few months ago, that basically puts a lens on 3 solar systems within the universe that you play in. So, for example, the analysts that we've been talking about, the journalists and media, and also the social voices, which was the heart of this discussion as it relates to online influence. So those solar systems that make the difference, that create the content, that drive the conversations and the influence in your marketplace that's relevant to you, that's what we analyze. We basically filter out all the noise. And what Social Ears serves up then is what's trending and what's topical today, not the frivolous tweets of I'm a gangster at South by Southwest, which is cool. Don't get me wrong. But
who did that?
But wait a minute, I tweeted that.
Wait.
I'm kind of.
Yeah, hold
on. I loved the picture. For anybody who knows Matt Charney, he had a great gangster picture that was on Facebook. But anyway. From that, but you identify trends, understanding the topics that make a difference in your business today, strengthen your own company's social media presence by following, again, the relevant influencers that you may want to try to build a relationship with, as well as choosing, again, more timely topics for your own marketing and PR, the white papers you want to write, webcasts, blog posts, etc., and as well as finding potential speakers, partners, competitive intelligence, and market research, and more. That's what Social Ears does for you, again, putting a lens on the solar systems that are your marketplace today. So that being said, I want to thank all my panelists today, Sarah White, William Tincup, Megan Mbiro, and Andy for helping with us. But do we have any questions, out there that are remaining before we end the session today? Anybody out there in audience land that's still hanging on the line? I've got a question. So, and I posed this earlier today in the social PR session. There's a big difference between B2B brand awareness and B2C brand awareness, and what that all means, and from a marketing and PR perspective, and even from a recruiting perspective too, or it can. But let's focus on when it comes to monitoring your brand, right? And that's something that we didn't really touch on in this call, but I want to explore it just for a couple more minutes. It makes sense in the B2C world because we've got brand sentiment, can make or break a Taco Bell or a Pepsi or Walmart or a lot of other consumer-based businesses. But what about in our space, though? I'm kind of throwing this out to all of you. What does it mean if one person tweets your ATS sucks? What do we do with that, right? From a brand management perspective. Thoughts?
Does anybody not tweet their ATS sucks?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, really?
I was like, pretty much every ATS sucks. Sorry, folks.
No, and I will not go that far.
Oh, come on. No, I'm just having fun. I'm having fun.
No,
but I mean, that is the sentiment on the recruiting side. That's all.
Right, but most of the times people have problems with the systems. It goes back to early on in our early conversation. They picked the wrong solution. It wasn't implemented well, or they haven't figured out, from the vendors haven't properly figured out how to do user adoption correctly. And so within our space, you have to take those within stride, but you also have to be aware as you see the negative things come through that it really might be something with your product, that your product may need a couple of minor tweaks. And so looking at your product strategy as it relates to the brand and everything else is important as that stuff comes through. Sometimes it's really minor tweaks that companies have to make that will make a huge difference in how people like the product. So I think one of the worst things that I have seen organizations do is every time those negative feedbacks come through, and every vendor in our space should be tracking and monitoring what is being said about you and about 3 or 4 of your top competitors online. You should be monitoring all of that information. And when the information comes over, positive or negative, you should be keeping a track of that. So as we look at product roadmaps and your product strategy, you are falling in line with what your real people, real users actually have to say about your product. It's a lot easier to tell the truth on Twitter than it is to your face when you're calling them, asking them how they like it.
Yeah, I absolutely share Sarah's sentiment. I think it's about mainlining feedback. The differences between B2B and B2C are actually fairly small in this regard. I think we need to know more about how every single person that touches our service or software is feeling at every moment. So that survey that was 6 months or once a year, let's touch in. I think all that, those days are all gone. And I think we have to mainline, using a drug reference if I may, I think we have to mainline feedback from the buyers and the users of all of our services and software. I think we just have to know all the time and have that pulse. And I like the way that Sarah expanded that out, not just to the pulse of us, but also having a small window into the pulse of how people feel about our top 2 or 3, 4 competitors, just to have an awareness. Not that it will dramatically affect anything, but just being keenly aware of how they're doing in the marketplace could also affect sales, the way that we talk to our sales team. Hey, competitor A is getting slammed right now for their implementations. Probably something you should bring up in the in the sales process, etc. So one's the awareness, and then turn that awareness into some type of action. So I think we have to be aware, but I think it's also in how we pivot that awareness and turn it into action, like Sarah said, back into the product, but on the competitive side, back into our sales and marketing efforts, etc.
It's all about active listening and in being prepared, and having that data to say, we care about our product, we care about our service, and we're living our brand, right, our workplace culture brand, and it's all about behaviors, right? All of what we're really talking about comes back to human behavior and how we're living our brands, both as personal brands, and sorry to use that word, but I will, and workplace brands. Who's listening? Because now we have 24/7 channels.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Having somebody that understands.
But on one quick note, and then we've got to wrap, is that I agree with that. But I guess to my point is that that's something that you've got to actually dig and pull out more so than you would if you were a consumer brand. And I guess to my point is you're not getting a lot of that online. Like for example, if you're on the tarmac for 7 hours, you're going to hear fail, fail, fail online all over the place. If you're stuck trying to get into your self-service HR software system and you're an employee, some of that may resonate inside, but you don't hear that outside as much, and that's something that needs to be pulled out more from the organization. I guess that's what I was saying on the difference. You don't see it as prevalent or as vocal as you do on the consumer side. But anyway, on that note, listen, thank you, my fantastic panelists. I totally appreciate your time today. I know you're all busy. It was a great discussion. Andy, thank you so much on the back end for helping me out today and doing the introductions.
Glad to help, Kevin.
Absolutely. And listen, everybody, have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you all again real soon.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.